Okay, I'm just going to show you guys some of the artwork in comparison to the 1860s Carta de Visite. I used to say Carta de Vista. I don't remember how I said it before. I just read it online, didn't know how to say it correctly until I met Gowan Weaver. And even after I met with him and he was correcting me on how I was saying things, did I start trying to say that correctly? I was like, okay, not Carta Vista, Visite. I don't know how I tried to say it correctly, but anyway, this is that image that was analyzed and published on 2023, January 2023. So we're on the 200-year anniversary of Joseph Smith and Moroni meeting. In vision, probably really in person, but here is the forward-facing painting by David Rogers. Analysis. So you can see that superimposition. You can notice they both have very high cheekbones and a very prominent chin. You do not see in Danny Larson's Locket image. Let's see, even the width of the face is similar. And you have to understand, in my picture, a lot of things are really blown out by the lighting. So like his collar on the left side looks thicker. It's not really thicker. You guys, it's white. Light's hitting it. It's a very, very early daguerreotype that was copied again. So when you copy a daguerreotype, the contrast goes up even higher. But he has these prominent ears. You don't see that in the painting, but there's artistic liberty. And clearly the painting is not super accurate. Junius F. Wells, I get the names confused of these different people at Junius. It's on a loop here. So if you click on it on my website, it'll loop over and over and you can just kind of look at it, analyze it. But really, for the death mask on there, you see that the nose, even with the death mask, it isn't that long. And the death mask over in my picture. But the chin, we can kind of go like that. Just a much more prominent chin. You do see the marionette lines. You see the right eyebrow's a lot thicker than the left. Okay, and just even look at the bow tie. Like the bow tie pretty much lands in the same spot. But the hair for sure looks different. So this is a September 1842 painting. And so you do see on the Joseph Smith Papers website that it's David Rogers, 1842. That was news to me after 2 years of studying all this. And it had only been like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months since I talked to Tegan Hamachi. And she was like, well, what is going on with this painting is based on the daguerreotype of Joseph Smith, but it doesn't look like your picture. It's not the same pose. Like this painting couldn't have been based on your picture, right? And so I thought that it just was a nut that there were more than one daguerreotype. Like I always believed that the whole time that I've researched this, which wasn't that long, since 2017. I didn't know anything about I didn't even know the word Library of Congress photo. I just knew nothing about these alleged photos of Joseph Smith until 2017. And so any of my friends would attest to that. I didn't talk about this before 2017. But he has that bouffant hair. It doesn't look like my picture. His body's angled differently, right? But there's still quite a few similarities. But when I found out that it really was from life, 1842, and we know Lucien Rose Foster wasn't in Nauville till 1844, either he just lost some hair 2 years later, but there's also the fact that when you look, but we can talk about the history here too, though, that it is from life and not post-mortem and based on a daguerreotype. So you can go through my whole timeline here and just read here September. It was 4 days that David Rogers spent painting Joseph Smith. And then you can go here, you can click on this link and read about Junius F. Wells. It's 1930, but he's talking about in 1875, before Emma died. About 4 years before she died, she showed him the forward-facing painting here, and he has this whole story. Does it look like Joseph Smith? No. Is it a very good likeness? No. But there's this whole story of David Rogers painting Joseph Smith and jumping up and down, trying to get him to laugh. He was depressed, and so his expression was eternally caught looking like he's about to burst out laughing. But Joseph didn't like it. He thought he looked really silly and goofy. He didn't like the painting. So in person, it was his in person talking to Emma Smith, who was there when this painting was done, and saying this painting is from life, is what Junius F. Wells is stating. Okay, but Joseph Smith III attests that later. So here's July 1879. You can see Library of Congress picture. Okay, that was donated. See copyright 1879. And you can see copyright Joseph Smith III, Plano, 10 miles away from where my picture was printed, Illinois. So Kendall County, Plano, Kendall County, Illinois. My picture was printed in Newark, Kendall County, Illinois in the 1860s. It's 1879 though. So it's quite a bit later. But if Emma just walked through and copied the daguerreotype and took the daguerreotype home and left a visit with someone, there were copies of daguerreotypes being done in the Smith family in the 1860s, because that's what happened. Emma Smith's 1845 daguerreotype, it was copied in the 1860s by Julia Murdoch Smith in Missouri, because she was living in Missouri. That's where that was printed. But it's the same cardstock, the gold, double gold. It was 1860s. Okay. But you do see that it was the other names that are a lot of information here. But I feel that I should go ahead and pull it up. So you have W.B. Carson, though. So Jane A. Robinson probably took the photo of the painting, and then they edited it. They did like old-timey Photoshop on the picture. So then that sort of warps, distorts, maybe the picture maybe curls. It's not like they're printing under a scanner. They're taking another photo, more distortion. Any angle being slightly different will distort any image. So you can see they say it's a copy of a drawing or painting. It's not from life. And then this is what I think most blogs. So I was regurgitating stuff for quite a long time that I just read online, that the forward-facing painting was based on a daguerreotype and not from life. But this is what they sent to Kim Marshall on her blog. So thanks, Kim, for putting that on there, because when I read this, I'm like, that's why they know it is from, like, this is a strong evidence that it's David Rogers. So this is printed. You can click here, go to a link. Hopefully it doesn't. Sometimes it asks me to sign it. It's the Saints Herald. Okay, and you even have the year, because that was on there. 1879, Joseph Smith III had been living in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois, in order mainly for the job to be the editor of this, the Saints Herald, to edit it. And then here is that advertisement. It wasn't even a month before that he was working with several different people to try to get this perfected picture of his father to send to the Library of Congress to look like a photo of his dad or whatever. I don't know why they wanted to blot out the whole background, but they did. It was a technique, and he wanted to see his dad's face, is what I believe. And so here you can zoom really far in if you want, and you see. So he's involved. I'm sure he wrote this. It's his newspaper. He moved from Nauvoo, several hundred miles, to Plano, Kendall County, outside of Chicago. And he says it was taken by a painter from New York. Was William Major from New York? No, he was from England. When Joseph Smith was 36 years old. Well, was William Major there to do a painting of Joseph Smith Jr. when he's 36? No, he wasn't. He wasn't there. David Rogers was. Joseph Smith was born December 23rd, 1805. So he was 36 in September 1842. And so it says it represents him at the time as he remained in possession of Emma until the close of her life. And then you see Janie and Robinson and Lois the Vitamin and all of that. And then you can just read a whole lot more history. And then I go into like the Carter image and the Junius F. Wells going, wait a minute, this is not a photo of a man, this is a photo of a painting. Let me tell you some things. And then that was 1885, and then it was 1930 that he has the detailed story that it was him. So that's why it seems to be in a weird order, but it is in the timeline of the actual story of 1875. That's when he tells the story in 1930, but it's at the top. Anyway, and this is the Carter image. It's exactly the same. Okay. There's only very, very slight differences between that and the Library of Congress picture. I've superimposed that. I have a whole video that you can watch down here about me superimposing and analyzing Carter's image with the Library of Congress image. So it makes absolutely no sense that this was made from a daguerreotype of the painting that Joseph Smith III didn't know existed, even though Emma Smith and Junius F. Wells and all these people say that Emma would refused to let the painting be copied before she died or photographed. So immediately after she dies, Joseph Smith III is taking photos. So how would he get confused to see a picture like this and think this is different than it isn't really, except the eyes are a little bit closer together. That's the only thing that is remotely different. So that whole theory that came out last summer that Joseph Smith III really just thought this, he never had the daguerreotype because they couldn't get this locket open. But this, in 1885, he suddenly finds a picture he forgot that there was of his dad. But it was just of the painting. And you know what I think debunks this? I want you to see and look at how level his eyes are. On the death mask in the skull, you see that his left eye has a step deformity. His left eye is lower. Okay, the eyes are extremely level. And of course, you see that in the Larson picture. But in the death mask in the skull, there's, according to Dr. Niles Harrod, there's a step deformity where the left eye is lower and the cheekbone is shaped differently. So there was severe damage to Joseph Smith's left eye. You see that in the duplicate oil painting because he mentions the duplicate oil painting in the 1910 letter. Oops. Oh, it's right down here. So if you keep going down here, going through the timeline, he states, he mentions, visit the capital of Iowa, there's a duplicate oil painting. There's an authentic oil painting. That's not the duplicate oil painting in Independence, Missouri. And then he starts talking about the painting. He's excited about the duplicate oil painting, you guys, which is this painting that shows the step deformity. So then he doesn't differentiate between the authentic or the duplicate oil painting, but then he says the bombshell that, which makes us letter history. It happens just that this portrait painted in 1843, was it this portrait or was it this portrait? Authentic oil painting or the dupe? It makes sense it's a duplicate oil painting, you guys. It's sustained in its characteristic likeness to my father by the daguerreotype from possession by Lucian Foster. So there's that whole history. And, you can look at this and criticize this and get all up in arms about the hair, which most people do. It can't be Joseph because it doesn't have the Elvis hairstyle. He doesn't have this huge mass of hair just teased and going really high up. But, so this September 1842 painting, September 1842. Why does he have more hair in September 1842 than he does in Sutcliffe Maudsley's June 1842 painting for the lithograph? Okay, this isn't that much hair. This is June 1842. This is also Sutcliffe Maudsley. Church of Christ of Latter-day Weber's, what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints website says that this was Sutcliffe Maudsley, and so is this. His hair does look quite a bit thicker here, but even then, it's not this bouffant. It's brushed forward. actually looks parted and kind of brushed over. There's that lapel though, that darker upper, that and just how it's open. Like that's just he seemed to just kind of leave his jacket open and kind of fling it open like that. Well, you can tell in my picture, it's just sort of this very open jacket and this darker upper lapel. There's some unique things I'm just going to point out real quick. I recommend looking here at prophetscars.com. This is Life Drawings page. I have several pages. So this first page is probably several pages if I printed it off or put it in a book, right? Then there's several other pages where I just sort of focus and put even more detail on stuff. And this is an unknown artist, so we don't know, but this was artwork in the book by Hatch about Joseph Smith's images from the 90s. And July, middle of the summer, 1842, Joseph Smith. He's got a popped up color. But pop down colors were a thing. So you see that left eyebrow really shorter, stunted. So they talk about that in the paper. You can see that there in my picture. His left eyebrow is a lot shorter. So why would I be able to see so much? This is sort of what's contested there, but they say that both of them do agree that it doesn't make sense that the hair wouldn't be picked up, but yet I'm just saying this now, like you can just about see the eyelashes. You can see a lot of fine detail of little hair, eyelash hairs. You know, it would have, and even a little bit of a scar. Like if this eyebrow was just as thick as this one, you would see the eyebrow hairs. And so we do think that that was, his left eyebrow was a lot shorter. And then this left eye is a lot lower than his right. Okay, so that often happens with step deformities when I, just me speaking, looked at pictures of step deformities, and that statement does not come from this paper, but comes from a 1995 paper study by Dr. Niles Harrod, a maxillofacial surgeon, working with anatomist Dr. Van de Graaff in 1995. Excellent study. And then here's Sutcliffe Maudsley, definitely his right eyebrow a lot thicker. And you can see I'm sort of outlining there's that much thicker. And then you can click here and read this journal entry. I think it was the 25th that Joseph Smith mentions. He sat for his profile for the lithograph on the city, which we know that was, and you can even see that if you go to the Church History Museum, you can see the actual lithograph that has, he looks, it's a horrible picture though. It's one copy, so Sutcliffe Maudsley wasn't always super consistent, but for the lithograph, I think it had to be a certain size, so it just got shrunk, so suddenly it looked short and fat. Like I think they somehow, it got super distorted, but it wasn't the best one. So this is not the actual picture. I think that ended up on the lithograph one. Doesn't have as much detail, I think, but he did paint him and repaint him over and over. And does he have Elvis hair that goes really sky high in his tees? No, he doesn't. This is September 1842, you guys. Okay, so you've got September. So I mean, sorry, here's September 1842. Let's put these side by side. June 1842. June 1842. Okay. September 1842. I reopened these a bunch of times. This is supposed to be September. You don't gain that much, you don't gain hair in the future. You lose hair, right? But somehow he gained a lot of hair from June to September. It doesn't make sense. It was artistic liberties. Okay, and then you can also see, sort of looks like here with Bathsheba's picture that his left earlobe looks really long. That's another asymmetrical thing, and that didn't end up in the paper, but you can see it looks like the lobe is a lot longer on his left side, where the right earlobe doesn't quite look quite as long. And then the earlobes looks pretty normal there. So I just sort of point out all these different wrinkles and the shading and just even that deep line right there, and how the nose sort of comes up a lot higher, whereas you can tell in the Larson Lockett photo, his nasal ridge seems a lot, it lines up a lot lower about there, whereas it's a lot higher in the death mask and all this artwork. And in my picture that I believe is Joseph Smith, you can see the nasal ridge is really protruding out much higher and more of a prominent chin, more of a prominent chin. Okay. And then here's the duplicate oil painting that, again, as I pointed out in that letter, okay, duplicate oil painting. There is an authentic oil painting. But going back, I think he went back to talk about the duplicate oil painting and he didn't live but 4 more years after this, and he was starting to go blind from an injury. But it was sustained the characteristic likeness of his father by daguerreotype and possession taken the same year, I think, by Lucy and Rose Foster. So you can go here and read all about the provenance page. So that's what I recommend, since a lot of people are very, very concerned about that. You can come here and read Godwin Weaver's analysis. You can read how the person who took this guy, J.S. Bivens, he passed away in Plano at age 69 in 1891. He was buried in the Millington Newark Cemetery. Millington is where Joseph Smith III mentioned being in 1860. And then Joseph Smith III was here in Plano, Kendall County, Illinois for like 16 years. And so, and then J.S. Bivens, if you look at historical records, had to go through that whole town in order to get to his post office ever. And so I give a little bit of story here, you know, and this is sort of what I really want and hope. So if you guys please share this, please share the anthropological review report study by Dr. Tegan Lucas and Machi Henneberg. I don't know, I mean, Deseret News mentioned them a couple of years ago because they did a whole study on seeing signs, just various things. I'm not going to try to quote it off my memory. I have to read it again, but because I'm not a scientist, I'm just an artist and a CMA. But their paper was mentioned and was noteworthy in the Deseret News, but not when they talk about analyzing a photograph of Joseph Smith and actually putting it in a scientific paper. Like, nothing's been in a scientific paper before about Joseph Smith's death mask and a possible photo and the one from this summer. That should be news. It should be newsworthy, you guys. But I think it would be wonderful if we could at least somewhat get the word around about this, because 2009, I knew nothing about this, but someone else was convinced enough that they spent $500, started buying all these photos from the photo album. But this picture was listed for like 400 grand or something, right? I did not pay $400,000 for it, but clearly people were sort of trying to buy it on this blog, and someone said reserve not met. Well, there you go. So there was a reserve that was really high. And so clearly this person could not meet the reserve that he wanted for this picture, which was, and I know he wanted like 400 grand in 2017 for this, what he thought was a photo daguerreotype. It was a daguerreotype of a painting that he thought was of Joseph Smith. And he said also wearing the Yerman Thummim. But it wasn't Joseph Smith, in my opinion, because he had sideburns and he kind of looks like this famous Catholic priest. I'll just say that. I'm just saying it now. Okay. But someone spent a ton of money. So who are you? Who is this high bidder Mormon that is willing to spend up to $500,000? They just didn't want to spend $400,000, you guys. But I'm not the only person that was convinced enough that they were like, wait, this Smith ID'd photos, this looks important. I'm going to spend, and so they just bought. So this person begins buying in 3 days, $20 to $45 each. Of course, he charged me $300. I have the receipts. I bought it from him. That's my story. And so please just pass this around to help me out and to, I believe this is him, and so this guy struggled to try to prove it was him and just didn't, just posted that this was highly probable, He said, after 2 years, I believe it to be each must, however, decide for themselves. And he still owned all the ID photos and one that he thought was Emma Smith, though very late in years. I don't know what happened to that one. I couldn't find that one. And so I just do know from this, I saw a few photos from this. So there were pictures with Smith ID'd, written in pencil, and it just said Mrs. Smith. And I thought, you think this is Emma Smith? Like, she has blue eyes. She's a little bit heavier set, and it's Missouri. Joseph Smith III and Alex ended up in Missouri, and their wives had a little bit bluer eyes, and maybe their weight fluctuated. I don't know. I just didn't. I should have bought that picture, but I didn't have any money after spending $300. So you can continue on through here and read how there in Newark, Kendall County, Illinois, there was a presidential campaign, George A. Smith, and you can look at the first page and see, just a presidential campaign was going on in Newark, and J.S. Bibbins was like 23 years old at the time. Someone tried to tell me J.S. Bibbins was not alive when Joseph Smith was alive, and besides, it's an 1860 picture. It just can't be him. They just shut their mind off, and they just don't have their mind open, except that we know there's an 1860s carte de visite of an image of Emma Smith from 1845. That's in the paper. So read the paper. It is free. The paper is free. The paper last summer about Donnie Larson's picture was not free. They charged for that. We are not charging to read this paper, so please share it. Please read it. Please just read through this whole page. Read about Joseph Smith III and how in 1860 he was there. He went from, Nauvoo over to there and started meeting these people that wanted to follow him. All the remnant saints were here that didn't go to Utah or near J.S. Bibbins, and he wasn't. I don't see any evidence that he joined the church. But, Joseph Smith III had several friends that were Methodists, though, and the Bibbins family was all Methodists. And their father, Elisha Bibbins, was in Susquehanna. He was in Harmony with the Hale family in 1812 and helped convert Isaac, which is super fascinating. You can read all the sources. Anything that's underlined, you can go through here and read and find that they were pioneers from 1828 to 1840. So you can see a little bit more on this historical website. And you see Alice, and then you can see Joseph Slocum, 1821, Wilkes Barre. Plano, Canada. This Wilkes Barre is straight due south from Harmony, where Harmony used to be. Okay, and then he dies in Plano. But his whole family went there in 1838. You can read about that. And the letters from Emma Smith. That was the best thing I found, spending thousands of dollars to do research for a week in Salt Lake City for this. And she wrote, because for years, I'd been reading about how the only way I could read these would be on microfilm. I needed to go in person. So I just found little excerpts from Emma Smith to her son, Joseph Smith III. He had left in January 1866, Nauvoo, and her son had been there ever since the father had died, and had married, had kids, and stayed in Nauvoo. All the kids had stayed in Nauvoo, and then they all started leaving, going the other side of Illinois to Kendall County. And then she starts saying how she thinks she's going to go to Plano. Pa Beineman thinks that I should fix up and go right off to Plano. And she's just saying how she dearly wants to come up there. And I tried to read as many letters as I could to see if she for sure went, but then she talks about the weather being the same there as it is in Plano, and then she starts talking about how she has not had her negative taken. I thought that I might as well look for Fred Bishop's card, try to get my negative taken. Negative. She's trying to copy a photo. So, and then she words it a couple different ways. She mentions it a couple times. And then there's David Hiram Smith's letter where he does state, well, his mom came. So she did go to Plano. And so that's there in the letter there. Those are all in microfilm. You just can't find them online unless you get permission. But I did find it. Okay, so there's Nauvoo, there's Plano, and then Newark's just like boom, right there, right? There's Ottawa, but again, that 1860 journal, you talk about all these people from this whole area. So there were a lot of saints left there, but he was all around there in October 1860. So he could have taken the daguerreotype from here, gone boom, visited these people in 1860, gone back. It would be another 6 years before he moved there. Alex had a child there, so he lived there for a little bit, but he mostly stayed in Nauvoo. And then he went to Missouri, and then eventually, they all went to Iowa, and then the two oldest ended up in Missouri. And then David Hiram, sadly, not long after these letters, went to an insane asylum because he just had a mental breakdown, sadly. And then you can see 1867, Emma talks more about the negative. May as well look clear. And then, so this is a photo car. So there she is mentioning, look for Fred's photo car. So also J.S. Bibbins could have had a photo car in Plano, but had a studio in Newark. And then there are several newspaper articles stating Newark is okay, it would have been nice, but it's surrounded by train tracks. So if someone took a train there, they would have to go through Newark. And then at the end, because I find this fascinating, it was the first things I found out. I'm like, wait, what? Just found this whole article by Mark Staker about this Elisha Bibbins. And then as I read all the historical, compared his story and read everything I could about Elisha Bibbins. So see, the Methodist Church has a lot of books on the beginnings of that church. That church pretty much started, I don't know, 20, 30 years before the churches Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints started, right? And they would pray in the woods. And Joseph Smith was more or less mostly, he would attend the meetings of Methodists in his early life. So, and then you can see these historical records. You can go to ancestry.com and just read all. It just is very fascinating, but I could only find one. I don't think it's a duplicate Elisha Bibbins. I think he knew Emma, and then you can go through the daguerreotype process I talked about in my last video, but you can see that for sure this looks like the matting. I really think this is the one by Lucien Foster. But what's hard with daguerreotypes is very hard to know who took it because they didn't put any evidence of who took that picture. Except when it came to paper photos, then you knew who took it, and then you could write who's in it, on it, if you wanted to, and see Marcena Cannon. So that's the Providence page. So you just please read it, please check it out, please go ahead and share all this, please just get the word out. We've just worked so hard the last 4 years, but it's him. Either it's him or it's not him. I really believe it's him. I didn't know about it. Has a, the guy who I bought it from has an internet footprint of since 2009, and there's no evidence that he was capable of creating fake photos like he would have. I think this is real, and I really think he was convinced, and no one believed him because they didn't. But Tegan Lucas and Machi Annenberg believe that it really could. See, this is free. I just clicked on this, and so people just don't understand the difference between the study referenced in a historical paper last summer about the Larson Lockett photo. There was no analysis written by any forensic scientists there because they didn't even put a quote from them. This is the first paper of the analysis that has ended up in a scientific journal. Okay, and you can just check that out. So please do that. And I recommend looking at the life drawings and seeing the incredible similarities, unique asymmetry that definitely matches this photo that I believe is of Joseph Smith. So anyway, have a good day.